The grand arena of the Celestial Gauntlet roared with excitement as thousands of alien spectators gathered to witness the most dangerous tournament in the universe. Warriors from every corner of the galaxy stood on the battlefield, towering reptilian warlords, insectoid assassins with razor-sharp limbs, and cybernetic gladiators enhanced with unbreakable armor. Each fighter had been genetically modified, battle-hardened, or evolved for war. Yet, in the middle of these giants stood a single human John Carter, small in size, unarmed, and completely outmatched. The audience erupted into laughter. A human in the gauntlet? It was a joke. Humans were weak, fragile, and had no special abilities. They lacked the natural weapons of the beasts and the technology of the machines. To the crowd, John was already dead before the fight had even begun. The tournament overseer, a towering alien with glowing eyes, raised his hand for silence. "The rules are simple," he announced, his voice echoing across the arena. "The last fighter standing moves to the next round. There are no weapons, no mercy, and no second chances." The crowd cheered as the overseer gestured towards Zarthak, a massive reptilian warlord standing over 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that acted as natural armor. His claws were sharp enough to cut through steel, and his muscles rippled with raw power. Zarthak smirked, stepping forward. "Pathetic human," he growled, his deep voice filled with amusement. "One hit, and you will break like a twig." The crowd chanted his name, expecting a quick and brutal victory. John took a deep breath. His heart pounded, but fear had no place here. He wasn't the strongest, the fastest, or the deadliest. But he was human, and humanity's greatest strength had never been brute force. It was adaptability, strategy, and the will to survive. As the overseer signaled the fight to begin, Zarthak lunged forward with terrifying speed. His massive claw swung towards John's head, aiming to crush his skull in a single blow. But John wasn't there. In the blink of an eye, he had ducked low, rolling to the side as Zarthak's attack smashed into the ground, sending cracks across the arena floor. The crowd gasped. Zarthak snarled, annoyed. He charged again, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground. But John was quick, too quick for the warlord's brute strength to catch. Every attack missed by mere inches. John was reading Zarthak's movements, analyzing his patterns, and waiting for the perfect moment. He noticed something: the warlord's thick armor like scales were strong, but they had gaps between them, especially at the joints. That was his weakness. Zarthak, frustrated by John's constant dodging, roared in fury. "STOPRUNNGANDFIGHT. He bellowed. He lifted both hands and brought them crashing down, trying to crush John like an insect. But this was exactly what John had been waiting for. At the last second, he dived forward, sliding between Zarthak's legs and slamming his elbow into the reptilian's knee joint, one of the weakest points. A sickening crack echoed through the arena. Zarthak howled in pain, stumbling forward as his balance broke. The crowd gasped in shock. John didn't stop. He couldn't. He had to finish this before Zarthak recovered. Using every ounce of his speed, he leaped onto the warlord's massive back. Zarthak roared, trying to shake him off, but John had already found his target, the base of the skull, where the armor was thinnest. With a powerful strike, he drove his fist into the weak spot. Zarthak's body jerked violently, his eyes widening in shock. For the first time, the mighty warlord felt something he had never experienced before: defeat. With a final gurgling breath, Zarthak collapsed face first onto the ground. Silence fell over the arena. The audience, which had been roaring with laughter minutes ago, was now completely stunned. No one had expected this. A human had just defeated a warlord. The tournament overseer himself seemed speechless. John stood over Zarthak's lifeless body, breathing heavily. His body ached, but he had won. He had done the impossible. Then, the silence broke into deafening cheers. Some aliens were furious, refusing to accept the outcome, while others watched in awe. The Celestial Gauntlet had just witnessed something new. The overseer finally spoke, his voice filled with disbelief. "The human has won. He raised his hand. John Carter will advance to the next round. The crowd erupted once more. Some cheered in excitement, others in rage. But one thing was certain: John had proven that humanity was not weak. As he stepped away from Zarthok's body, John knew this was just the beginning. He had survived the first fight, but the tournament was far from over. More powerful enemies awaited him. More deadly challenges stood in his way. But now they knew. The universe knew. Humans were not weak. They could fight. They could win. And most importantly, they would survive. The arena was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. A moment ago, the audience had been roaring with laughter, mocking the fragile human who had been foolish enough to step into the celestial gauntlet. But now, they were in shock. John Carter, the so-called weakest fighter, stood over the lifeless body of Zarthak, the reptilian warlord. The once mighty warrior, known for his brutal strength, lay motionless on the ground, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. A human had just killed a warlord. The weight of the moment settled over the crowd like a storm. This wasn't supposed to happen. Zarthak had fought in hundreds of battles, crushed countless enemies, and never lost. His thick scales were stronger than steel, his claws sharper than blades, and his experience unmatched. And yet, here he was, dead at the hands of a human. The overseer of the tournament, a towering alien with glowing red eyes, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The human has won. His voice echoed across the massive arena, but it barely registered in the minds of those watching. They were still trying to process what they had just witnessed. John stood frozen, his breathing heavy. His fists were still clenched, his muscles tense, as if expecting Zarthak to rise again. But he didn't. The warlord's body remained still, a pool of dark green blood spreading beneath him. John felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. He had survived. He had fought against a creature 3 times his size, against impossible odds, and somehow he had won. But he had done more than just survive, he had changed everything. The Celestial Gauntlet was the deadliest tournament in the universe, a stage where only the strongest warriors were allowed to fight. For centuries, no human had ever been invited. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were nothing more than a weak and insignificant species, barely worth noticing. This fight was supposed to be a formality, a cruel joke played for the amusement of the crowd. But John had shattered that illusion. And now, every being in the arena knew the truth: humans could kill. The silence was finally broken by a deep, guttural growl. One of the reptilian warriors in the stands leaped to his feet, his massive fists clenched in fury. "This is a disgrace," he roared. "The human must have cheated. Zarthak was the strongest of our kind. A mere human could never." His words were drowned out by an explosion of voices, some in agreement, others arguing. The entire arena erupted into chaos. Some aliens were furious, demanding a rematch, claiming John's victory was a fluke. Others were watching in stunned silence, their minds racing as they tried to understand how this had happened. But a few, the smartest ones, were looking at John with something new in their eyes: fear. The overseer raised a hand, and the crowd fell quiet once more. His glowing eyes locked onto John, studying him carefully. "This outcome was unexpected," he said slowly. "But the rules are clear. The human has won. He will advance to the next round." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. John wasn't done. This wasn't over. He would fight again. He would face stronger, deadlier opponents. And if he could kill once, he could kill again. The implications were staggering. John exhaled, steadying himself. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him, some filled with rage, others with disbelief. He had made enemies today, powerful ones. But he had also done something far more important: he had made them afraid. For the first time in history, humanity was not seen as weak. The galaxy had always looked down on them, but now they would think twice. Because if one human could do this, what if there were more? The doors to the arena opened, signaling the end of the match. John turned, walking toward the exit, his heart still pounding. He could hear the murmurs, the whispers, the shifting tides of thought among the spectators. Some were already plotting against him, others reconsidering everything they knew about his species. But one thing was certain: the universe would never forget what had happened today. The first kill had been made, and it had changed everything. The dropship trembled as it entered the thick atmosphere of Valcor 9, a planet so dangerous that even the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy avoided it. The skies were black with storm clouds, and flashes of green lightning illuminated the jagged landscape below, towering. Mountains of razor-sharp rocks, endless forests filled with creatures that hunted anything that moved, and rivers of acid that carved through the land like open wounds. This was not a battlefield. This was a death trap. And yet, this was where John Carter had been sent. The Celestial Gauntlet had deemed him unworthy of fighting in the next round of the tournament, not because he was weak, but because he had done something no one expected. He had won. He had killed a warrior far stronger than himself, and now the tournament's rulers were afraid. They couldn't let a mere human continue to rise, so they had chosen another way to eliminate him. They had sent him here, to Valcor 9, under the pretense of a challenge. If he could survive for 7 days, he would be allowed to re-enter the tournament. But everyone knew the truth. No one had ever survived 7 days on this planet. The dropship doors hissed open, and the moment John stepped out, the air burned his lungs. The atmosphere was toxic, filled with unseen dangers. He pulled a breathing mask over his face and scanned the surroundings. The jungle ahead was alive with movement. Things slithered between the trees. Glowing eyes watched from the darkness, and distant roars echoed through the canyons. Every creature here was a predator, evolved to kill in the most brutal ways imaginable. But John was no stranger to impossible odds. He had survived the Gauntlet's first fight when no one believed he could. And if they thought this planet would break him, they were wrong. His first goal was simple: find shelter before nightfall. The temperature would drop to lethal levels, and the creatures that hunted in the dark were far worse than those in the day. Moving carefully through the dense jungle, he avoided making noise. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his instincts. Every step had to be precise. One wrong move, and he would end up like the countless warriors who'd been sent here before him, torn apart, dissolved in acid, or crushed beneath something far bigger than himself. A low growl rumbled through the air. John froze. The trees ahead shifted unnaturally, as if something massive was pushing through them. Then it appeared: a Xerec beast, a towering creature with thick, bone-plated armor and 6 glowing eyes. Its claws were the size of swords, and its jagged teeth dripped with venom. It had already spotted him. There was no running. It was hunt or be hunted. John's mind worked fast. He couldn't overpower it, and he couldn't outrun it. But he could outthink it. The beast lunged, its claws slicing through the air, missing him by inches as he dove to the side. The ground shook as it landed, but John had already moved again, forcing the creature to turn. It was big, strong, but slow. And then he saw his opportunity. The terrain around them was unstable, riddled with deep fissures from past quakes. If he could lure it into one of those cracks, he might just have a chance. He ran, making sure the beast followed. It charged after him, its massive body tearing through trees, destroying everything in its path. John led it to the edge of a deep ravine where the ground was weak. He stopped just before the edge, turning to face it. The beast roared and leapt forward. At the last second, John threw himself to the side, rolling across the dirt. The Xerec beast, unable to stop its momentum, crashed down and the ground beneath it gave way. The monster let out a deafening scream as it tumbled into the darkness, vanishing into the abyss below. Breathing hard, John stared at the empty space where the creature had stood just moments ago. He had done it. He had turned the planet's dangers against itself. But this was only the first test. The jungle was filled with creatures like that, stronger, faster, deadlier. And he still had 6 more days to survive. Night fell, and the true horrors of Valcor 9 emerged. The jungle-changed trees moved as if they were alive, whispering in eerie tones. The ground pulsed with unseen energy. And then there were the hunters. Unlike the beasts, these creatures were intelligent. Tall, skeletal figures with elongated limbs and glowing, empty eyes. They didn't hunt for food. They hunted for sport. And John was their new prey. As he crouched in the shadows, watching them stalk the land, he realized something. The Gauntlet's rulers had made a mistake. They had sent him here to die, expecting him to be like the others. But John wasn't just surviving, he was learning. Every fight, every encounter, every trick this planet had, he was figuring it out. He wasn't just a human trying to stay alive. He was becoming the hunter. John Carter didn't remember how they took him. One moment, he was inside his quarters, resting after the brutal fights in the Celestial Gauntlet. The next, his vision blurred, his thoughts became heavy, and his body refused to move. A sharp, piercing sensation shot through his skull, and then darkness. When he woke up, he wasn't in his body anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere inside his own mind. The world around him was vast and endless, shifting between memories, thoughts, and emotions. He saw fragments of his past, his childhood, his struggles, his victories, but something was wrong. He could feel them. The Mind Reapers. They were here, crawling through his mind like parasites, tearing through his memories, searching for something. He couldn't see them, but he could hear their whispers, alien voices slithering through his thoughts, trying to break him, to take control. John gritted his teeth. He knew what they were. The Mind Reapers were feared across the universe, creatures that didn't invade planets, but minds. They didn't need warships or weapons. They entered your thoughts, twisted your reality, and made you their puppet. No one resisted them. No one fought back. Because once they were inside, it was over. But John wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid. If they wanted his mind, they were about to regret it. The Reapers dug deeper, searching for weaknesses. They pulled at his worst memories, trying to drown him in fear. He saw his past battles, the moments he almost died. They made him relive the pain, the suffering, the hopelessness. They wanted to break him, to crush his will. But John had been through worse. He had survived the deadliest fights in the universe, stood against monsters that should have torn him apart. And if he could survive that, he could survive this. He pushed back. The Reapers screamed. They weren't used to resistance. Their prey always gave in, always surrendered. But John fought back. He focused, forcing his mind to change. The shifting world around him stopped being a battlefield of his worst fears and became a trap. He turned his memories against them. The nightmares they had pulled from his past, he twisted them, making the monsters inside his mind attack the invaders. The Reapers shrieked as John's thoughts became weapons. His pain transformed into something they had never encountered before: human defiance. They tried to escape, but it was too late. John had locked them inside. He wasn't the one trapped anymore, they were. And now he had control. The world inside his mind became a storm of chaos, a battlefield where he held the power. The Reapers panicked, their whispers turning into terrified screams as John crushed them, one by one. They had entered his mind thinking he was weak, believing he would be easy prey. They were wrong. One by one, they vanished, erased from existence. John could feel them dying, their presence fading like dust in the wind. When the last one was gone, the world around him began to shift, to crack. The invasion was over. He had won. And then he woke up. His body jolted back to life, gasping for air. He was in a cold, dark chamber, connected to alien machines. The Reapers' true forms twisted. Spindly creatures with pulsing brains lay dead around him, their fragile bodies collapsed, their minds shattered. They had underestimated him. They had entered his thoughts believing they could own him. But John Carter wasn't just a survivor. He was a fighter. And now, the universe would know humans don't break. They fight back. The arena was silent. Thousands of alien eyes watched. The final battle of the Celestial Gauntlet was about to begin, and at its center stood John Carter, humanity's last warrior. His body was covered in scars, his muscles ached from the countless fights he had survived, but his mind was sharp. He had come too far to fall now. Across from him, his final opponent emerged from the towering gates, a Tyrok warlord. 12 feet tall, its body was layered with natural armor, its 4 muscular arms each holding a different weapon. It had killed champions from a dozen species, and now it had only one more to defeat. The warlord stared at him, then laughed. A human? This is your best? Its voice was deep, mocking, filled with confidence. The audience laughed, 2 creatures from across the galaxy, watching as the supposed weakest species faced certain death. John didn't respond. He just breathed, his fists tightening. They didn't understand. They never did. A deep horn echoed through the arena. The final battle had begun. The warlord moved first, swinging its massive energy axe with terrifying speed. John barely dodged in time, rolling to the side as the weapon shattered the ground where he had stood. Dust and debris exploded into the air, but John was already moving. He knew he couldn't overpower the warlord. It was bigger, stronger, built for war. But he had something else: speed, strategy, and the unbreakable will of a human. The warlord charged again, swinging wildly. John ducked, weaving through its attacks. He was calculating every move, learning its rhythm. The alien fought with brute force, relying on power rather than precision. It was confident, too confident. John saw an opening. He moved fast, dodging a downward strike and countering with a brutal kick to the warlord's knee. The alien snarled, stumbling slightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. The crowd fell silent, surprised. No one had ever made a Tyrok warlord stumble before. The warlord's eyes burned with fury. It roared, slamming a fist into the ground. A shockwave erupted, sending John flying back. He hit the arena wall hard, pain exploding through his ribs. The warlord charged, swinging all 4 weapons at once. There was nowhere to run. But John had already planned for this. At the last second, he dropped to the ground, sliding between the warlord's legs. The alien's weapons smashed into the stone wall behind him, cracking the structure. John sprang up, grabbing a broken spear from a fallen warrior nearby. He turned and threw it with everything he had. The weapon pierced through the warlord's exposed side, sinking deep. The alien roared in pain, staggering. The audience gasped. The warlord ripped the spear from its body, blood dripping. It was enraged now, fighting recklessly. It charged again, but this time John was ready. He sidestepped at the last moment, using the warlord's momentum against it. The massive creature tripped forward, smashing face first into the arena floor. John didn't hesitate. He jumped onto its back, wrapping his arm around its thick neck. With every ounce of strength he squeezed, cutting off its air. The warlord thrashed, trying to throw him off, but John held on, using his legs to lock himself in place. The alien's struggles became weaker, its roars turning into gasps. And then silence. The warlord's massive body collapsed. For a moment, nothing happened. The arena was frozen in shock. Then, the silence shattered as the horn sounded again, the sound of victory. John Carter had won. The Celestial Gauntlet, the greatest tournament in the universe, had a human champion. The crowd erupted in a mix of awe, disbelief, and something else. Respect. The same creatures that had mocked him now looked at him differently. They had thought humans were weak. They had thought John wouldn't survive. They were wrong. John stood tall, breathing hard. He had proven it. Humanity was strong. Humanity was relentless. Humanity would never be underestimated again.